We're back with another episode of Shh, we're in conversation, and I'm chatting to Rehana about an interesting event that happened this week. It was a closed networking event at the Seriti Institute. Rehana, could you please tell us more about that?
So yes, Adil, the Seriti Institute had their fourth annual partnering network event, actually at the Standard Bank Global Leadership Center. But I want to place the event in context because the event happened on the 1st of July, that obviously being a day after the 30th of June, when South Africa was really bracing itself for a self-declared date by a range of organizations that were calling for undocumented foreign migrants and foreign nationals to leave the country. So I want to place this event in the context of juxtaposition between high levels of anxiety, high levels of fear, deep concern for the future of our country, and then a day later, this partnering network event that was hosted by Seriti Institute, who do amazing work across the country in fields of early childhood development, agriculture, and climate change related programs that they refer to as green works. And I think the juxtaposition of fear versus hope, the juxtaposition of economic despair versus seeding new ideas for community sustainability. So they held the event under the theme, Journeys to Possibility. What are the things that hold communities back and what moves them forward?
So I think that's a very interesting conversation during this period of time, like you say. And as a country, we're looking at negatives more than positives. What do you think could change the situation currently?
Well, I think it depends what we mean by the current situation. The current situation is many things, and depending on who you are and where you are, your reading of the current situation is different. I think last week when we chatted, Adil, I indicated that a range of South Africa's challenges are really sitting around issues of the economy and economic models. I think what was exciting about the Seriti Institute event is that it brought together people from the public sector, the private sector, from NGOs and civil society, but importantly, this particular event also brought in the voices, the real and lived experiences of young people who have been beneficiaries of public employment programs. And I think a deep part of the event, the whole panel conversation, was how do we move beyond public employment programs into more sustainable approaches for young people, and how do we ensure that young people become part of the design of some of what is being conceptualized in public employment. But I think there was also some significant inputs from Mohau, from Solidaridad, also an NGO organization that was picking up on the internal state of young people, the extent of anxiety, the fear of failure, the inability to kind of see a clear path, the advent of artificial intelligence, of technology. What does this mean for how we evolve as a society? And so I think this issue, if anything, I mean, there was a lot on the content side, and Seriti Institute have written a beautiful summary of the situation. There was also Robert Dursley, who did a very amazing graphic capturing of the content discussions of the issue, of of what was discussed at this partner networking event. But for me, what became clear is that too many people are moving too quickly, are rushing all the time, are constantly in deadline mode, so that we're not talking to each other, we're literally talking past each other. Whether people are in the public sector, in private sector, and in NGOs or CBOs, everybody really, most people from a deeply well-meaning space are wanting to make a difference on the country's trajectory, are specifically wanting to be in service to youth and young people. But often we're trying to do it with the lenses of our organization. And I think what Seriti did beautifully with the partner networking event was to reimagine the possibilities if we all worked together towards one vision, irrespective that we come from different spaces in the system.
Thank you for that, Rehana. I think that was quite insightful. I also know you met a lot of interesting people this week, apart from the Seriti event, or due to the Seriti event. Can you tell me more about that and some of the meetings you have upcoming forward?
So I'm going to choose one because some of the meetings are still going to happen. There were many fascinating people at the Seriti Partner Networking event. And, I enjoyed speaking to many different people, but of course I was in facilitation mode, and that often means I'm busy setting up the room or trying to get the next activity ready or ringing my little barefoot facilitator bell to get people back into the room. But there was a young man by the name of Sia who joined an activity that we had right towards the end of the session, which of course is one of our barefoot facilitator trademarks, Mind the Gap. And Sia stepped into the Mind the Gap conversation quite late. He came down from this beautiful auditorium at the Standard Bank Global Leadership Center, and he said a couple of things that I found particularly insightful for a 29-year-old South African. He said, well, look, some of us will leave this venue in our Lexus cars, and some of us will leave with public transport. But what worries me the most is that people will leave this venue and not necessarily follow up on conversations they've had or people they've met. And I was deeply struck by some of the issues that Sia raised, and so on Thursday morning reached out to Sia, and yesterday, Friday afternoon, Sia visited Barefoot Space. He is a creative. He had actually come to the event with his mum, who's from the ECD sector. And I really, really just enjoyed his insights as a young South African, his curiosity. Oh, the other thing that really struck me about Sia when he came into the Mind the Gap conversation was he kind of said, well, it's evident that we as young, or we as, I can't remember the exact term, but he talked about the need to research more, to learn more, to be more curious. And that picked up for me beautifully a question that had come up in the Mpumalanga Motse Collective Impact the week before. A young person in that gathering had put a question to Prof. Pumlani from University of Stellenbosch. And Prof. Pumlani had said, well, the first thing young people need to do is show up. And Sia had kind of showed up at the partner networking event. The second thing they need to do is invest in themselves. And I thought that, Sia's willingness to continue engaging, to find a way to come to Barefoot Space, to be in a continued conversation was part of investment in himself. And then the third thing that Prof. Pumlani had raised was the need for young people to convene other young people. And Sia was explaining to me how he's been creating these safe point events. But he was also quite sad that, in fact, the funding primarily for influencer events is coming primarily from sectors that don't necessarily resonate with values. Predominantly alcoholic beverage sectors. And how do we begin to reimagine society without the influence of betting companies and alcoholic beverage companies putting their money behind these convenings of young people?
Thank you, Rehana. I think that was really insightful for this week. We look forward to continuing the discussion next week, and thank you for your input.